Like, no matter what I did in my business in my life, it felt like I could only stack it so high before the pieces would start to fall. I'm doing well over here, but now there's a problem over here. Now I'm having to focus over here. And I just reached the point where I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. Hi there, and welcome to Kingdom First Podcast, God's blueprint for your best life. I'm your host, Jonathan Lautermilch, and I want to thank you and I want to honor you for coming in and checking out our very first episode of this podcast. I've been super excited to start this new venture and to start putting out, content around, what I believe a relationship with God, looks like through my own experiences, and really breaking down, what are these, principles that we can follow that lead to truly living our best life. As we go on with this show, I'm going to be sharing my testimony, of course, and, all the things that I've learned thus far in my walk with Christ, and my journey with all this to say. With that being said, just to be clear, I am not a pastor, I am not a preacher. I'm just a guy on his walk with Christ, and has decided to go all in and truly commit to that way of not just thinking, but that way of living as well. So I wanted to create a platform where we could have these conversations, and a lot of these I'll be doing are solo episodes and sharing my thoughts as I go down things. But I'm also going to be bringing on, some really cool guests that I've got lined up that, may be a little bit farther down their walk, or may have a different life experience, or just a different way to look at it. But I believe that success leaves clues. So the more we can get those messages out there, the more we can start to decipher those clues and find the ways to apply that in our lives. Now, a little fun fact about me: before I started this podcast, this is not my first time podcasting, by the way. I've been podcasting since 2020, back when the old Rona virus hit us. And, and that first podcast was Real Talk with Real Fit Pros. And I did that with, my business partner at the time, Mark Zalmanoff. And we ran that podcast for about 120 episodes or so. And it was a really fun time going through and doing that podcast. But no, I eventually reached a point to where, I decided to expand outside of just, helping those in the fitness industry. That became Real Talk with Real Business Pros, which, did that for about a year and a half. And once again, I reached another point in my life where I just wanted to start talking about things that truly matter. And I'm not saying that business doesn't matter. Business is very important. But I got to a point in my life where I wanted to really look into, like, what is real truth of not just how to win in business, but how do you win in your marriage? How do you win in your family? How do you win, the fights that no one else sees, and that's what helped inspire me with, Kingdom First Podcast. And now here we are. Right. So as we get into the episode of where I want to start with, really kicking this series off is, what is this blueprint that I'm talking about, right? And for me, when I say a blueprint, I think the ultimate blueprint in life is going to be from the Bible. There's so much wisdom sprinkled throughout that, that massive book, which is the number one best-selling book of all time. It's something that I started my journey on about a year ago, of just simply reading a chapter a day, and actually reading it from the perspective of not how do I fit this word around my lifestyle, right? So I can justify the way I'm doing things. How do I understand the true word so then I can start to change my lifestyle to fit the word, right? Because once again, success leaves clues at the end of the day. And, one of the biggest, I'll say revelations that I've had, since going down this walk, which has been really since 2020, 5 years now, since I've committed to understanding the word more, and leading my family better, and ultimately changing who I am at my core, which is it's been a lot of work, let's just put it that way. Is this one message, and I've been preached this my whole life, and honestly didn't really connect until honestly a few weeks ago, if that tells you anything. Is the structure of importance of how you should really lead your life, right? Because as I've discovered, reading the Bible and then getting around other people that are, well more versed and been down that road and a little bit far down the path, is in the Bible, when they refer to, my business, they're not actually just referring to what you do for a living. That's where a lot of us, associate that word. When you say business, you think about your company, or if you have a job, you think about your employer, in that context. But in the Bible, when the word business is used, it's not actually just referring to what you do for work. It's talking about all things. It's talking about you. It's talking about your family. It's talking about your spouse. It's talking about your relationship with him. Those are all the things that are concerning within the business, right? And part of this whole thing is I want to win in all areas. I don't want to have a great business, but my marriage sucks. I don't want to have a great marriage, but my business sucks. I don't want to have a great marriage in my business, but man, my relationship with my kid is terrible, right? And I don't want to have a great relationship with my wife, my kid, and my business, but I've got no relationship with my family, right? It's about how do we win in all of those things, and what's the way of thinking that's going to lead to that. So the structure I'm going to share with you, I call it the key five. That's how I remember it. Is really in terms of importance of where your time, attention, and your treasure should go in the order, is God first, spouse second, your children third, your family of origin / family of choice fourth, and then your business is actually last, right? And I struggled with this for so long because it sounds really nice on paper, right? It can be quite challenging to actually apply it at the end of the day. I can't tell you for how long I have put business at the top, and I've been an entrepreneur for, coming up 7 years now. So for me, business was my idol for the longest time, right? And over the course of, let's just say 6 years, because last year I gave God the business, and we're fully rolling into that this year. So we'll say 6 years of, putting that business as like the number one, number two thing. And then wherever I could fit in the other pieces on whatever order is what would happen. My experience living my life that way felt like I was building a Jenga set, right? And if you're old enough to remember Jenga, probably in your mid to late 30s as we come through this. If you're younger, it was a cool game we played as kids where basically you stack all the different pieces, then you pull them out, and whoever pulls out the last piece and it falls ends up losing, right? But in terms of comparing it to the metaphor, like no matter what I did in my business in my life, it felt like I could only stack it so high before the pieces would start to fall. I'm doing well over here, but now there's a problem over here. Now I'm having to focus over here. And I just reached the point where I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired, like I joining all the masterminds and getting all the mentors and doing all the physical challenges, all these different things, right, that you see us do on the internet as entrepreneurs, trying to better ourselves. Because at the end of the day, what we're actually trying to do is control everything. And for me, I reached a point where I was just done. I was just done trying to control things that I quite honestly weren't meant for me to control, right? We only are given so much that we can influence, and we need to own the things we can own. But on the other hand, like we also don't need to have our peace taken and the quality of our lives vastly diminished because we are, trying to control everything and make things happen and within the timeline that we want, right? So as I started to really study the structure, and once again I'm building my relationship and trust with the Lord him, which is obviously helping me gain that courage and gain that faith muscle to build so I can keep moving forward, to have certain things proven to me, which is obviously built more confidence with the process, right? So with that being said, like, what does that look like in applying, right? God first, spouse second, kids third, family of choice / origin fourth, and business fifth. When the way I've come to understand it is if I focus on filling those needs in that order, my needs get more than met in that process. So what does that look like with filling the need with God? So as I started to think about that, I'm like, well, what does God need from me? He's God. He doesn't need anything from me, right? Well, there is things that he wants from us. Number one, he wants a relationship. right? That's why, he sent his only son to come back and to die for our sins so he could create that pathway for all of us to have that personal, relationship with him. So for me, when I think about, relationship, when I first started praying, like a lot of Christians, I feel, go through this metamorphosis to say, is the first time you start praying is when you're in trouble or when you need stuff, right? And then I started to think about it from his side. If I'm only reaching out and only communicating when I want something or need something, man, how frustrating would that become being on the other side? And I'm sure you're listening to this going, oh, I know a person in my life right now. They only hit me up when they need something or whenever drama's going down. It's like, well, how motivated and inspired are you to want to invest and bless that person that honestly is being more of a taker at the end of the day, right? So as I started to challenge my way of thinking in terms of how I show up in my relationship with them, I started to not only pray for the things that are on my heart that I want and I need and things I'm struggling with. I started just also praying just to go, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate everything you're blessing me with. I appreciate everything you're blessing my wife with. I appreciate everything you're blessing my daughter with, my business with. And these are also times where it might not necessarily be a seed that's bore a lot of fruit at that time, but me honoring him in the process is part of what's helped me build a really great relationship with him. So I think that's the first piece when it comes to like, what's God need? He wants your heart. He wants a relationship with you, but you got to put in your side of that puzzle to build that with him. I think the other component of that is, he wants your faith. He doesn't want just your belief. Like anyone can believe, anyone can say they can believe, especially when things are going well. But how do you believe when things aren't going well? And that's the true test, right? And I think as you start to pass those tests, well, then you get challenged on, okay, if you truly believe all of these things happen in the Bible, and you truly believe that all these biblical truths are actually true, right? How are you acting that out in your life? And now, for me, one of my challenges with that was I grew up with a very scarcity type mindset when it comes to money, right? So I've never been quick to spend it. I've been very quick to save it, and try to find how to pay the least amount, right? It's something that got ingrained in me at a very young age. And it's something that I've had to, unlearn, right? As I've gotten older. But as I've gone through that, if I truly believe that God is our provider, right? How am I showing that in my actions with how I spend my money? For example, in my tithing, right? Which the whole point is none of this is actually ours anyway. So let's give our creator, right, the owner, his cut, which is at 10% of every dollar, right? One of the things I started doing a couple years ago was adding that tithing. And funny enough, my finances started skyrocketing after that. Now, I'm not telling you that, oh, if you start tithing, like, here's your ROI that you're going to get. And that's not why you do it, but it's a really cool benefit that happens for those that are willing to walk in those steps. I also think about key seasons in my business where I was absolutely terrified to make an investment or hire that higher level person, but it's going to put me in a financially uncomfortable situation, or to join this mastermind that I know I need to grow in. All these different decisions where once I truly put my faith in God, going, hey, I know he's going to provide what I need for whatever I need to go through this season. I just need to be a good steward and make wise decisions, right? It's created a lot of peace in my life. And once again, I notice the more action I take, which on my belief, which is what faith is, the more that I'm noticing that on the other side, everything takes care of itself. May not happen exactly how I would like it to happen, or how I think it will happen, which is why I've learned to let go of how this should go and the timing of it, and just truly start putting my faith in him at the end of the day, just going, what can I do for my part? That's what I believe, what that looks like, right? When it comes to, what does God need from you? So that's the number one thing. Well, now you start getting into your spouse. What does your spouse need? Right. And, me and my wife had a very interesting conversation about a month ago. And it was a difficult conversation because, we finally had an open conversation about, what do, I truly need from you, as my wife, and what do you truly need from me as your husband? Right. And I was actually talking to, a guy I had on another podcast a couple weeks ago about this, and I was sharing this with him. He was like, yeah, men just need sex and food. Which, there's a lot of truth in that. You definitely, it definitely ticks off a large portion of, what a man wants. Right. But, what I'd like to go is a layer deeper with that. I believe that every husband, and I know this for me, it's not just about that. It's about having real intimacy, that real connection, right? Because through intimacy is the only way that a man can get his soul fed. And if a man can't get his soul fed, the version of that man that you're going to see operating in that life is not going to be the version that you're going to be happy with. But when you're truly getting fed in that way, man, it changes the whole dynamic of everything, right? However, on the other side, you know, your wife probably needs, certain things to have her needs met, right? And they're oftentimes very different, right? And what that looks like. But until we're starting to have those real conversations and come from a place of, not like, hey, if I do this for you, then you do this for me, which is more of a transactional relationship versus going, hey, I understand that these are the things that you need from me. And I'll give you an example with my wife, Renee. Her number one thing is quality time, right? Uninterrupted, totally focused, quality time, and, creating that space for her to have like mental peace and clarity because, my wife carries a lot on her shoulders, right? A little bit more than she should at times, right? To be quite transparent with you. But as I've gotten to learn her and understand that, the more that I can focus on fulfilling that need in her, makes it easier for her to fulfill the need within me. Right. But once again, it's coming from a place of transformation, going, I'm going to do this for you, regardless of what you do, because that's the kind of person I am. And, I'm willing to do that because I know my wife is a gift from God to me. So for me to honor him, well, it starts with honoring her too, because she's my number two or my number one in life, right? And what we're doing for this. And as we start to get clear on that, what that looks like in our spouse, maybe a little bit different for you. I will tell you this, it will lead to a very, very cool level in your relationship, but it comes from going, what is the need? How do I focus on that need for you, whatever that may be? Now, as we start to go down, then you have kids, right? Now I've got a 2-year-old daughter named Aria. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, my greatest creation, to say the least. And, it becomes very easy as a man to delegate or go, hey, you take care of this. I'm going to go focus on business or that fixing the house or whatever the manly thing is. Where the truth is, your kid doesn't care about any of that. As they grow, as they reflect on their childhood, they're not going to think about all the times you went out there and made it happen for them, or the toys that you bought, or the schools you got them into, or the sports clubs you got them to play in, whatever those are. They're not going to remember that. They're going to remember that one-on-one time that you spent with them, because that relationship is going to be the internal thermostat that you help create within that kid. And as they grow up, this is going to be a large portion of what helps mold them into the kind of human they become. So for me, what that looks like is, every day I spend at least 1 to 2 hours uninterrupted with my daughter. Right. And sometimes it's quite inconvenient, right? Based on what's going on. But she is one of the most important things, right? Once again, only second to my wife, in terms of life, in terms of focus and attention and what's truly important at the end of the day. And for me, it's been awesome watching what that's been able to do for her as a, baby coming to a toddler, and she's already acting like a little kid. She's developing at such a crazy rate. And I know that comes from the seeds that I've been doing for my part. And once again, I've got my wife and we got a whole team here helping too. So I want to honor them and their contributions to, who our daughter is becoming. But I know a very large part of that confidence where she comes from is from that time that she gets to spend with me, which is why it's important to put her in that order for that honoring them. Now, as we go into family of choice and family of origin, I put those two together because you're going to have family that, you're born into, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, cousins, all those things. But you also have people that you just do life with, right? And, unfortunately, not everyone's blessed with a great family of origin. So they have to go out there and, get their family of choice and go find those people that, align with the same common values and truly have each other's back. So that's why I put those together. But I'll give you an example of a decision that I made to prioritize family of choice before business. I have one of our team members, Josh Riggs, who started off as a client, and we've been working together for years. He's been awesome, and so awesome that he's joined our team over here at Smart Publishing. He's our director of our CRM, Aria, named after our daughter, and he's helped us totally reshape that whole CRM and really get it popping and really get it helping our clients and our members. And it's just been awesome working with them, but we reached this one pivotal moment where the game plan that I had originally set up just wasn't working. It was creating frustration within me, like, hey, why are we not progressing in this area? But once I took a step back and I really got to talk to him and figure out, like, dude, what's really going on in your life? Well, I found out that there's some other things going on personally that were really keeping him from being able to reach this goal, this target that I set for him. Which once I saw the full story, I realized, like, dude, this isn't fair to you. It's not fair to me to put this standard that you're never going to hit because it's the wrong play. We restructured, what he was handling at that time and took some things off his plate. I readjusted my game plan. And, through that, my conversation with him was this. I was like, hey, Josh, like, I want you to know we're just going to do life together. Right. So that means I'm not going to fire you because you don't do X or don't hit Y. But we're going to have some real conversations at the end of the day. Right. But we're just going to do life together. And after that conversation, with me choosing to put him first above what I wanted from the business, not only did he get his piece back, we're actually growing even faster now in the new direction of what we're doing because I was fortunate enough to have God give me the wisdom to not make a decision to, I'm frustrated in the season with you right now, which is in the relationship, to go, no, let's figure out a better way because you are the right person and you are here for a reason. And I'm going to honor you and put you first and we'll figure out the business stuff second. So I just wanted to share that with you as an example of like maybe what that may look like for you. Now, and now we get to the crux of it, which is the last part. The last part is your work, your business, what you do for your career is actually last, right? And I know that can be terrifying. I know that can be scary. I still struggle with it. There's times where I'm like, I need to go do this, or, it's going to get ripped away from me and taken away from me. And I'm going to have to go back and get a job and all the fears and all the things, right? Even though I've been doing this for 7 years now, just part of being an entrepreneur. But as I've let go of that so much and I focus more on those first 4 in that order, I cannot convey the amount of ease and flow that's created to what we do in business. Like I work less hours, but we get 10 times more done. And we're literally at a point where we're actually turning business away to some extent, right? Based on who we're looking for and, what our mission is and what we're dialed into. And, I remember seasons where, you go through as an entrepreneur and it's like, I got to take every deal I can get, right? And that's part of that scarcity mindset. If we're not careful, we'll creep back into is because once again, if you're truly going to put your faith in God and once again in his business, which is all things, those things will be provided for if you're honoring and doing your job and what you need to focus on. Because at the end of the day, God did not make us to go chase paychecks. God did not send us to earth to go close deals. God did not send us to earth to just grind on your business, right? God sent us to the earth with a unique gift that he has instilled in every single one of us. There's nothing that anyone could ever say to convince me otherwise, that you don't have something special within you that you do with ease better than 99% of other people. Now it's up to us to develop that talent and develop that skill to maximize it, right? For that calling that he's put on our life. That's our job to do that. But those are the reasons that we're sent down here into the earth. And those gifts aren't meant for us to hoard away for ourselves. They're meant for us to go bless others. So if we start focusing on honoring God, blessing your spouse, blessing your kids, blessing your family and your family of choice, the business stuff tends to get a lot easier at the end of the day, right? So I wanted to kick this first episode off with really focusing on that key 5, because I have never experienced more peace, more bliss, more joy, and more abundance in, where we're growing as a company, as a business, than getting that structure right. So if you're someone that, and I use the analogy of Bill Murray from Groundhog Day. Once again, I'm giving my age away as we're doing this, but if you ever feel like you're waking up each day and you're just repeating the same day over and over and over again, as year after year after year after year, and nothing's changing no matter what you do, maybe it's time to rethink the structure of what you're putting in terms of priority and putting in terms of focus. And when you start getting those alignments right, everything starts to click together, and now it becomes more of like a waterfall that cascades from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. So I hope you got value from this episode. I wanted to share this because this is something that's been on my heart as of late. And, with us talking about God's blueprint for your best life, this has been the best structure that I've ever applied to my life, and it's creating it's creating amazing things in all areas. So I want to encourage you to, if you're struggling with this, first start with, what does that relationship building look like with God? For me, it was getting into the Word. It was also taking my family to church every single Sunday, and once again, not taking them to church to check a box, right? But bringing them there to actually go, this is my opportunity to grow. This is my opportunity to learn. And this is my opportunity to get my orders for this week and what I need to focus on. And as I've led my family that way, as I've led myself that way, I found that my understanding of God has increased, my trust in God has increased, and that's allowed me to pray more bold prayers at the end of the day, which is part of that relationship component of, sharing with them what's on your heart. Because at the end of the day, God doesn't want your works. He wants your heart, and he wants your faith. So start taking those first steps. If there's anything that I can do to encourage you or help you along the way, by all means, make sure you connect with us on YouTube. You can also connect with me on Facebook. I pretty much live on that platform. And also, if you're a man and you're looking for a Bible study, I run one every other week on 9 a.m. On Fridays. Actually just got done today before I'm doing this episode for this one. I would, by all means, feel free to reach out, connect. More than happy to get you in there and come check it out, see what it's all about. Would love to be able to play, my small role in helping you down that journey. So with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. Also, don't forget to like, share, do all the things. It's going to really help this channel get out there, which once again, I'm truly on a mission to help people start living a God-first life and, discovering that blueprint for them so they can start living their best life. With that being said, God bless, and thank you for tuning in.